Welcome to Experiments and Debugging Birth. In this video, you're going to have a few objectives. The first is going to be to debug reproduction. Last time you may have noticed when you pressed your setup and go procedure that you just had this overpopulation of turtles being created, and yeah, they were reproducing, but didn't seem like any of them were really dying. And so that's one of our objectives for today. And the other is going to be to modify parent turtles to be more realistic. That will help with debugging reproduction. And the third thing that you're going to do is run some experiments. So you're going to use a slider to control how much energy the turtles get and see how that affects your turtle world. Okay, so let's go to our birth and death model. You should have a setup button, a go button, and a plot. You'll also have two monitors that I don't have right here because we can see everything we need to for this one with just the plot. And we'll go to our code. You wrote a reproduce procedure where you set the hatchlings to go forward 3 or more, or sorry, 1 or more I should say. And you also change their color so you could see which ones were hatchlings. So your reproduce procedure looked a bit like this, probably. Okay, and let me zoom in there so you can actually see. The problem with this is that when a turtle reproduces and hatches, all of its settings, except for what you change right here, are going to be exactly the same. And that includes the setting or the variable that we wrote on our own, which was the turtle's own energy. So we need to fix that because in real life, a baby is not born being completely full and not hungry and having tons and tons and tons of energy. So we're going to add a command in our hatchling procedure, and we are going to say set energy, and we'll set it just to the same energy that our parent turtles had from the beginning in our setup procedure. So we can look back up there, and they originally set their energy random 30 plus 10. So we'll pretend that those were baby turtles and random 30 plus 10. And so these are baby turtles now. If we go back to our interface, you'll see that that kind of solved the problem. But we still are not quite as accurate as we could be. So your hatchling has its energy set random 30 plus 10, but the parent is still at full energy capacity, and that is really not realistic. So we are going to go ahead and outside of our hatchling procedure, but still in our if, so it should be right here. Again, hatch, and then this procedure will be here. We're going to tell the parent turtles set energy minus 30. Okay, that's much more realistic because in the wild when animals or creatures or whatever reproduce, it takes up and uses a lot of energy. So let's go ahead and check that. Go to our interface, hit setup and go. And now we've got a more stable turtle population. You can see here it goes up and down about the same rate, and the grass does too. Okay, that's what we're looking for, is a pretty stable population. Now you guys are going to be doing your first real net logo experiments. The owl one we did a while back was all right, but this is actually going to be a legit experiment. So what you're going to do that is use a slider to control how much energy the turtles get from the grass. And then we're going to see if there's a certain amount that's not enough nutrition for them, and if there's a certain amount that's too much and they can just overpopulate. So if we will go ahead and unselect our go procedure here, and we'll go to our code. So for changing the amount of energy they gain from the grass, we have to find our procedure with the grass. Okay, so that's where we set the grass, but where did we ask the turtles if they're on a patch, then and it's green, then they gain energy, and that would be in our walk procedure. So right here, if our P color equals green, they set their energy plus 20. To make a slider, we're going to get rid of that number, and we're just going to put energy, all one word, energy gained. And now if we check our code, it's going to say nothing named energy gained has been defined, so we have to go actually create a slider. You do that in the drop-down menu right here, click add, and then type in exactly the same as you wrote there. Okay, we want our numbers to be from 0 to 100, and we'll go ahead and click OK. So you'll see at default it starts off at 50, depending on what you put in your numbers. And now we can set up and go. And this tells us specifically that every time the turtles land on a green patch, they're gaining 50 points of energy. And you'll see their population still pretty stable. What you guys are going to do in your info section, in that spot that we've been keeping for our experimental section, is play with the slider and find out what value is too little. So you can run it at 0 and see that obviously if the turtles don't gain any energy from the grass, they're going to die out every time. Okay, so if you go to your info section, you should have the what it does, and again, your good paragraph from last time. You don't have to write that again. You're just going to fill out your experimental section for this model. So you're going to copy this down, or you can write it in paragraph form. But basically, you're going to report on when I changed energy to 0, this happened, and you'll fill in that. When I changed it to 10, this happened. So for instance, when mine was at 0 and I hit set up and go, the turtle population decreased to 0 and the grass went up and then stays constant. So it took over the whole thing. So that's what you're doing, for each of these values, all the way through 100. And you're just going to go by tens. You don't have to go by ones. And then at the very end of this, I want you to answer these questions. So you'll actually, the biggest pain in the neck for this model is going to be to copy this stuff and to copy the questions word for word and then answer them. So what was the lowest amount of energy you could use and still have the turtle population survive? And what amount of energy was the highest you could get without having the turtle population all die out? So believe it or not, there is a value somewhere here that if you have them gain too much energy, they will overpopulate and then bad things happen. So once you've got those done, there's one last question I want you to answer, and that's, why do you think the turtles died out when they gained too much energy from the grass? Okay, so once you've got that done, go ahead and file, save as, so this will not take over your Energizer Turtles or your birth and death, and you're going to save it as experiments in birth and death, dot your first name, dot your last name, dot and logo, and then of course send it in a message to me on My Big Campus or message it to me on My Big Campus. And before we take off for the end of this video, here it's not cute, but here's some really cool Photoshop computer science stuff for you. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to ask your neighbors or me, and have fun killing your turtles.